What does it really mean to be a human? If we understand this fundamental question, we can properly understand our health. Yet, many people aren't well versed in what being human really means. What we need to do, to really understand ourselves, is zoom out completely. Let's understand ourselves from our most basic components, and then slowly zoom in. If we zoom out completely, we would first understand that as humans we're part of the universe. And the universe is essentially just a bunch of energy and atoms moving around. Everything in the universe is interacting with each other. If you have an explosion of energy in one place, it will impact another area too. We as humans are of course intertwined with this universe. At our core we're just a part of the interconnected energy, interacting with everything around us. The universe is also always simply either in a state of expansion, or contraction. With scientists thinking at the moment, that as a whole, the universe is expanding. We also need to know that everything in the universe is balanced. All energy is balanced with each other equally. If we have a reaction of energy in one part of the universe, it will impact another part of the universe. In the same way as we said earlier, everything in the universe is interacting, and we're interacting with it. Now let's zoom in closer. Within the universe, we're on Earth. A round piece of rock rotating around the sun, with the moon rotating round it. What does being on Earth mean for us? Well, it means we have cycles and clocks. The sun goes down at night and rises in the morning. The sea tides go in and out. In some places, we have winter and summer. There are numerous cycles and clocks, especially 24-hour ones, but we can zoom in even more. We're on Earth, but we're not a piece of rock or carbon. We are a living organism. Living organisms interact with everything around them, just like everything does in the universe. And we can categorize the things we interact with into two groups. The first group is nourishing things. These are things that we want more of, the things that we want to move towards. Like water, air, light, or good food. Then the other group is toxic things, in other words, anything we want to avoid. For example, toxic smoke or pollution. As a living organism, we respond to the things we interact with. Whatever we interact with will act as a stimulus, which will trigger whichever appropriate action as a result. The goal is to regulate ourselves, to keep ourselves in the viable ranges that we can survive in. For example, us humans would die if we get too hot or too cold. So when a living organism gets too hot, our actions will result in us trying to cool down, perhaps through sweating or moving out of the sun. And when we get too cold, our actions will result in warming us up, like shivering, or putting on more clothes. The stress from the uncomfortable temperature will be the stimulus fundamentally driving us. Being a living organism is really all about homeostasis. This ability to regulate ourselves independently, from all sorts of changing environments, whether it be heat, water, or social interactions. We're just all trying to keep within these viable ranges. Now, let's zoom in even more, because we're not a plant or a reptile, we're a special type of living organism. We are mammals. Mammals are special because when born, they're not born from an egg and ready to function straight after. Instead they have a long developmental period after birth, where they learn how to function. When we are born, for example, we don't know how to walk or talk yet, we have to learn that. And mammals will learn a large amount of what they need to know, from their parents. We form a special bond called an attachment. This attachment will be our view into understanding the world, and will help us develop the skills we need to survive in adulthood. During our development, our attachment relationships will help us regulate ourselves, ensuring we've got enough food, water, and a stable environment or manageable emotions. The goal is eventually to learn the skills to be able to self-regulate on our own. As mammals are so dependent on their attachments, especially in learning to tune our bodies to be ready for the outside world, our bodies can also be programmed by that attachment relationship. Depending on what influences we get from our attachment relationships, our biology will be programmed differently. Now, we know we are mammals, let's zoom in even more. What kind of mammals are we? Well, we're apes. In fact, our most closely related species is the chimpanzee. So what does being an ape really mean? Well, first of all, apes are a type of mammal that have developed tool use. Monkeys can use rocks and sticks to help them with tasks such as eating or foraging. Us humans have hands capable of complex movements of objects, that can help us with a variety of behaviors. Second of all, complex cooperation can be seen in apes. We form complex social groups that work together to help us achieve more complicated tasks. However, we're not any ape, we're a human. So what's unique about us, and what makes us fundamentally human? Well, to start, of all the mammals, we've got the longest developmental period. As adults we are the most complicated, so our long development allows us to slowly build up and learn all the skills we need. Our self-regulation is the most complex, and our parents will help us learn how to regulate things like our emotions, feelings and internal environments. We're so complex we don't actually finish developing properly until we're the age of 25. Our development is also so long, because we have one of the most complicated nervous systems. We have very advanced sensory abilities, able to sense our environment, make sense of that information, and use it to advise our decisions. We have, for example, many nerves connected to our gut, which help us to develop gut feelings in our everyday life. Many living organisms also operate on a system where they're just doing consecutive automatic unconscious habits. We're no stranger, with about 40% of our daily actions being habits we don't think about. But there is something slightly different about us humans. We have developed a special part of our brain called the prefrontal cortex, which sits just where our forehead is. It is the last of our nervous system to fully develop, and it is the most challenging to develop properly. But what does it do? Well, whilst we have great sensory abilities and intuition, the prefrontal cortex has allowed us to develop an ego. It's where we can intellectualize information, where we can think about information. And sometimes, our egos can be bad, when we follow the intellectualization of our minds, over the gut feeling of our bodies. However, sometimes the intellectualization can be useful. The prefrontal cortex allows us a greater consciousness and mindfulness. We can think more critically, rather than acting on impulse. We can evaluate thoroughly whether we should do something. It allows us to inhibit any impulses we don't want to do, as well as integrate complex thoughts. As babies, we cannot understand that two thoughts can be true at once. If someone is mean once, for example, it's difficult to comprehend that the same person could also be a nice person on another day. As developed adults, our prefrontal cortex can help us understand the integration of information. The result of our prefrontal cortex development as humans is that we could build civilizations and cultures. Our prefrontal cortex allows for more complex social interactions with each other, as we can inhibit behaviors that would harm them, and integrate complex thoughts about our interactions. We have been able to work together like no other species, and build cities, nations and all sorts of infrastructure. Cultures have also developed, and been able to be passed down and shared, enriching our societal wisdom. And fundamentally, this also allowed the development of language, where we could speak to each other and both understand and talk out our emotions, as well as communicate our needs and wants to each other. Whilst we're all human, it's often poorly understood what that really means. But that knowledge is vital in helping us live a healthy and happy life. So, how can we use this knowledge to help our health? Well, let's zoom right out again. If we understand we're just a part of the universe, we understand that we're just a part of its energy, and that we need to balance our own energy. We need to critically look at ourselves in terms of energy, what is draining our energy and what is boosting our energy. We can also understand ourselves as being able to expand or contract, and we should always try to expand, following things that are good for us and which contribute to good in the world. Then if we understand we're on Earth, our spinning rock with 24-hour cycles, we understand that we should be in tune with those cycles, sleeping when it's dark and awake during the day, for example. If we understand that we're living organisms, we understand we're interacting with the things around us to balance our homeostasis, and we should focus on nourishment, as well as limiting toxic things and stress. As mammals, we should focus on having good quality attachments and relationships. And if we can't, we can still recognize that our attachments are important in shaping our biology, and we could, potentially, reprogram that biology. Then as humans, with our complex very sensitive nervous system, we can use it to our advantage, maximizing the good sensory information it receives. And equally trusting the responses our bodies give us, over our intellectual ego. But the real epitome of human health will be to do with our prefrontal cortex. We should be social and cooperative, engaging with the culture and wisdom we've developed over centuries. We should use language and talk to each other. In fact, a lack of language richness in childhood has been associated with a number of diseases including Alzheimer's. We should also be mindful and conscious. We know how much mindfulness is beginning to be found to be linked to health benefits. If you look at what it means to be a human, we would have known that all along. And finally, we should practice the skilled art of holding two thoughts in our mind at one time. As our prefrontal cortex is healthy and developed, we move towards becoming more of what makes us human. And being more human is fundamentally more healthy for us. If you'd like to learn more, like and subscribe, and find many more of our videos on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok and NAS.